China is very safe. That's something that you have probably seen or heard many times online expressed by foreigners who have been in China. But what we don't often talk about is the systems that are put in place to make the safety possible. And in today's video, that is what I'm going to talk about. Hi China navigators, I am Nikita Makwana, and in this video, we are looking at what really makes China safe. Are people really so good? They are so kind. They don't think about crime. What is making China's safety possible? This is what we are getting into today. I want to start with this. In public policy, we understand that safety is a governance outcome. So there should be something that the government is doing to make sure that people who are coming from the outside are actually experiencing this. The first thing that is put in place is the centralized and standardized emergency. When you walk around China, you are going to realize that in many places there is something written Paichusuo or the police. So people know who to call. This also applies when there is an emergency, when there is a fire outbreak. The numbers are clear. People don't debate on who should I call. Everybody knows. I know that this is also there in many other countries, but what makes China different is because there is repetition and informal education on this. People are spoken to about on who to call, which department is responsible for this. So they hear this over and over and over again. I want you to understand that in many other countries where maybe you go around and something bad happens and there is late response, it's not because the services are not there. It's because people get confused when something happens, they don't know who to call. I think that this is something that we can be able to benchmark or to learn from. Let us repeat to our people so that they know who to call when something happens. The second system that I want to talk about is the residence registration. Once you step in China as a foreigner, you go and register where you are going to stay. You register that with the house management, you register that with the police, the local police. There is a clear structure on who stays where. There is traceability and there is lack of invisibility. I acknowledge that there has been a lot of debates with regard to that means people do not have privacy. That has been the perspective and the discussion online. But what we do not talk about is how effective this is when it comes to tracing someone, maybe when they engage into street fights. How effective is this when somebody commits crime? How effective this is when something happens to you as a resident and people are able to find you, or the management is able to find or to trace where you are. It creates a level of accountability. I like to think about this thing that's very popular or common in many different countries. A foreigner comes into your country and then they register that they're going to live in this particular city. After that, they can easily move to another city, reside into a different city, and you don't know which city they have moved to. When you think about it systematically, this increases crime because people know that their movements are not easily traceable. This China system, I tell you, is very effective. Whether you are going to lodge in a hotel, whether you are going to go in a private stay, or you're going to live in a certain residential place, there is a system that's very clear to say you are supposed to be registered. If you are moving to another city, you should be registered. If you're going to have somebody visiting you, you have to make sure that they are registered. Nobody just gets up and stay wherever they want to stay. They're going to move to their friend without the traceability. Again, we may see that it is effective even though we can have the arguments that people's privacy and stuff like that. It's not a perfect system, but it is very effective, and I believe that there's something that we can learn from that. The third system that makes safety possible in China is the non-emergency service channel. Again, emergency or safety is not always about crime. Sometimes it's just understanding who to call when something has happened. Whether it's you going to immigration, you want to handle immigration paperwork, there is a fire outbreak, there is that clear communication to say this is who to call. I like to think or to discuss I like to discuss the system from this perspective. Imagine you have a grievance or you have a complaint between you and someone who sold you some goods. You don't have to ask yourself a question, do I call the police? Do I call management? Who do I call? Because that conversation or that conflict should have somebody that resolves it. But when people are confused on who to call, they can end up fighting about that. You can see how that fragmented and poor communication on who to call can lead to crime. Let us take a look at the fourth one, which is the community level governance and responsibility. Now, China operates under the grid style management. Under the grid style management, everybody has a responsibility. I'm talking about your responsibility as a resident. What is it that you are responsible for in the community? You are responsible for keeping your environment clean. You are responsible for reporting crime. And then let us go a little bit higher. The housing management is responsible to communicate everything that is happening around with you so that you do the right thing, because they are held responsible if anything within that residence area happens. I want to give you an example that we know that in Hong Kong, a tragic incident occurred and many people lost their lives. May their souls rest in peace. They lost their homes. It was a chaos, okay? That incident was very tragic. But what I noticed is after the incident, we as residents here in Guangzhou, in this building where I am staying, they sent us the incident to say, this is what happened. However, we want you to know that you have a responsibility of moving things or putting things in the right places as a resident. It's your accountability to do that. So you are getting this information not from the radio, not from the television, where like, oh my God, people have lost their lives. What a tragic incident. It does not stop there. The communication goes to say, as management, this is the responsibility that we are reminding you that you have. So you can see that information is trickled down to the last person on the chain. And I think that this is very critical. And then the other one that I wanted to share there is that there are cameras everywhere. When you see cameras, the first thing that you feel is you are being monitored. But when you think about it systematically, is when somebody gets into your residence and then they do something that harms you, that person can be traced. That surveillance can be able to trace someone. Even when you are walking down the street, someone is coming behind you, you have the awareness that both of you are under the surveillance. So that's something that can stay in your mind. I want us to take a look at the fifth and the final system in place, which is the digital accountability in everyday life. In China, when you get into a taxi, the information of which taxi you went to, the identity of the driver is there. Everything is clear. Hence, for most of us, when we get into taxi, we can sleep until we arrive wherever we are arriving, because it is not about digital development. China has put a system that makes sure that people are responsible digitally. As we wrap up this conversation, I want us to remember this. It is not about perfection, but it is about having things that we can acknowledge from a system that's very effective. And this was just the examples, some of the examples that I could give from my lived China experience, my observation, and what is already there on researches and on paper. So as a continent, especially the African continent, we've been collaborating a lot with China and learning things. But I think that what is more important is not copying and pasting what China is doing. Even when it comes to something like safety, right? When it comes to things like technology, it's about looking at what systems are they putting in place to make sure that whatever that they're doing is effective, including the safety that I have just communicated with you. Like I said, we have emergency services in our countries, but the response is often slower. Why is that? Because we don't have stronger systems that allows safety to be there. We have the law that is supposed to protect our citizens or people around our country and to just make our countries lucrative. But why is it that people often get away with things? Why do people get away with things like murder? Why do people get away with stealing? It's because there is too much freedom. The systems are not strict. The consequences are not clear. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to hearing your comments. You can drop them in the comment section. This is Navigating China with your one and only Mizana China, Nikita Makwana. See you on the next one. Bye bye. Remember to like, to subscribe, to share it with your friends. Ciao.